My dying mother promised her guardian angel would protect me. My mother died 2 months ago. It wasn't a tragedy in the sudden, shocking sense. It was a long, slow, quiet fading. Cancer. We had years to prepare, but you're never really prepared. The last week was spent in a sterile, beige-colored hospice room that smelled of bleach and the specific, sickly sweet scent of decay masquerading as medical cleanliness. I sat by her bed, holding her thin, papery hand. Her skin felt like old parchment, translucent enough that I could see the blue rivers of her veins beneath the surface. Just watching her breathe became the entirety of my existence. She was at peace with it. That was the strangest, most difficult part. While I was a tangled, screaming knot of grief and anticipatory loss, my stomach in constant knots, my jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. She was serene, almost glowing with it. On her last day, when her breathing was shallow and her voice was a dry, rustling whisper, she pulled me close with surprising strength. Her eyes, which had been cloudy and distant for weeks, were suddenly crystal clear, lucid, terrifyingly lucid. "Don't be sad, my love," she whispered, a faint, tired smile on her lips. "I'm not afraid. I've never been afraid. He's always been with me." "Who, Mom?" I asked, my voice thick with tears. "The doctor? The nurse?" "My guardian," she said, her gaze shifting to a point just over my shoulder. I turned to look. The doorway was empty. A late afternoon shadow, nothing more. My protector. He was a gift from my own mother when she passed. He's kept me safe my whole life. He's never let any real harm come to me. I didn't know what to say. My mother had always been a little spiritual in a vague, non-denominational way. Not religious exactly, but open to the mystical, the unexplainable. I just assumed it was the morphine talking, a final comforting delusion her dying brain was generating to make the transition easier. I squeezed her hand, said nothing. "When I go," she continued, her eyes locking back onto mine with an intensity that made my skin prickle, "he will pass to you. He has to. He needs someone to watch over. You will be safe now, always, no matter what comes." "Mom, don't talk like that," I choked out. "You won't believe me at first," she said, ignoring my protest, her voice gaining a strange, final strength. The morphine drip beeped softly beside us. "But you'll know. There will be 10 marks, 10 signs after I'm gone. When you've seen the 10th, you'll know he's with you. And then you will see him, and you'll understand." She recited the marks to me then, her voice a low, rhythmic chant, a ritual, a curse, or a blessing. I honestly couldn't tell. A coin returned, a silent bell, a path cleared, a saved fall, a warning unheard, a fear answered, a scent of the old earth, a touch of cold fur, a voice not your own, and finally, a gaze returned. She finished, and a deep, peaceful sigh escaped her lips. She closed her eyes. Her hand, which had been squeezing mine, relaxed. Her breathing became even more shallow, more faint. And a few hours later, as the sun was setting and painting the hospital room in shades of orange and purple, she was gone. The funeral was a blur. The weeks that followed were a suffocating fog of grief and paperwork and the endless, exhausting logistics of death. Choosing caskets, selecting flowers, writing an obituary, notifying people. People kept calling, saying how sorry they were, saying things like, "She's in a better place now," and "At least she's not suffering anymore." As if those platitudes could fill the sudden, enormous absence in my life. I was just going through the motions, a ghost in my own life, an automaton. I'd completely forgotten my mother's strange, final words. They were just the ramblings of a dying woman, a final, beautiful, utterly meaningless piece of poetry, the kind of thing people say when they're on the edge of non-existence, grasping for meaning in the void. Then the first mark appeared. Mark 1, a coin returned. I was at the grocery store on a gray Tuesday afternoon, fumbling for my keys in the parking lot. The day was one of those late fall days where the sky is so overcast it feels like the whole world is holding its breath, waiting for something bad to happen. I was lost in thought, or maybe just lost in the numbness that had become my default state, when a quarter slipped through my fingers. I watched it fall in slow motion, watched it hit the dark, wet asphalt, heard the bright, metallic clink that somehow seemed too loud in the quiet parking lot. Rain had just... When I got to my apartment and emptied my pockets onto the dresser, my keys and wallet and receipts scattered across the wooden surface, there it was, a single, dry, gleaming quarter, sitting right in the center of the pile. I stared at it for a long time. My apartment was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. I picked the quarter up, turned it over in my fingers, examining it for some clue, some explanation. Nothing, just a normal quarter, cool and smooth and impossible. My pockets had been empty. I was certain of it. I always checked my pockets before throwing anything in the wash. But my grieving, exhausted mind immediately supplied a dozen rational explanations. I must have had another quarter in my pocket all along. I must have picked it up at the store without realizing it. Maybe I'd found it in the car. Maybe. I set the quarter on my nightstand and tried not to think about it, but a tiny, cold seed of unease had been planted somewhere deep inside me. It sat there, growing roots, waiting. Mark 2, a silent bell. A week later, to the day, I was walking home from work, taking my usual route past an old, decommissioned church. The building was massive, brick and stone, dating back to the early 1900s. It had been closed for years, the congregation dwindled to nothing, The building sold to developers who had grand plans to turn it into luxury apartments. The plans had never materialized. Now it just sat there, slowly decaying, looking like the corpse of faith. The evening was falling fast, the way it does in November. By 5 p.m., the world was already dark. I was walking past the silent stone bell tower, my hands jammed in my pockets, my mind somewhere else, when I heard it. A single, clear, resonant bong of a great bell. The sound was enormous, impossibly loud, echoing through the cold evening air with such force that I felt it vibrate through my chest. I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart rate spiked immediately, my body flooding with adrenaline before my conscious mind caught up to what I'd heard. I looked up. The tower was still. The great bell, I could see it through the stone latticework of the tower, was motionless. No wind, no birds flying out in startled flocks. No one else on the street seemed to have noticed. An elderly woman passed me without breaking stride. A teenager on a skateboard paid no attention. My hands were shaking. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, loud and erratic. I told myself it was an auditory hallucination. Stress and grief do strange things to your mind. They can trick you into hearing things that aren't there, seeing patterns in random static. I'd read about it. Grief-induced psychosis. It was a real thing. But that didn't stop my hands from trembling for the rest of the walk home. Mark 3. A path cleared. 3 days later, my counting had become compulsive now. Something happened at work that I couldn't explain away. My work building is old, built in the 1970s, and the maintenance staff is constantly doing repairs, wrestling with ancient electrical systems and plumbing that was installed before building codes became a serious thing. I was heading to the break room on the 4th floor to grab coffee, a task I performed twice a day like a ritual, when I encountered the obstacle. The hallway was blocked by a massive, wheeled cart piled high with equipment and tools and supplies. It was enormous, taking up almost the entire width of the narrow corridor. A worker was nowhere in sight. I sighed, annoyed at the disruption to my routine, and turned to go the long way around. I got to the end of the hall, turned the corner, and then I realized I'd forgotten my wallet at my desk. I turned back. I had maybe another 10 seconds of walking time before I'd reach the blocked hallway. I was already mentally prepared to take the long route again. When I rounded the corner, the hallway was empty. Not just empty of people, empty. The massive cart was gone. There was nothing but beige carpet and fluorescent lights and the faint hum of the building's HVAC system. The whole process had taken less than 30 seconds. There was no way anyone could have moved that massive cart that quickly, and there was nowhere to move it to. The hallway was a dead end in both directions, except for the main corridor I'd just come from. I stood there for a long time, my coffee forgotten, my wallet forgotten, my entire being focused on making sense of what I was seeing, or rather, what I wasn't seeing. When my coworker Janet passed by on her way to the bathroom, she found me standing motionless in the middle of the hallway. "You okay?" she asked, giving me that look, that concerned, slightly creeped-out look that people give to someone they think might be unstable. "Did you see anyone moving a cart?" I asked. "A big metal cart with tools?" "Just now?" she frowned. "No. Why?" "Nothing," I said. Never. Nothing, I said. Never mind. I didn't go to the break room. I went back to my desk and sat in the dark, trying to convince myself that I'd been confused about which hallway I'd taken, that I'd imagined the whole thing, that grief was doing exactly what I'd been afraid it would do, breaking me down piece by piece, making me unreliable even to myself. I called my therapist that evening. Mark 4, A Saved Fall. I was clumsy with grief, not paying attention to my surroundings. The week after the cart disappeared, I was walking down the stairs to my apartment's lobby, distracted by a text message from my sister asking if I was doing okay, a question that seemed to get harder to answer with every passing day. I missed a step. It happened in an instant, but it felt like it stretched out forever. My foot found empty air instead of concrete. The world tilted. My stomach lurched into my throat. I was falling, my hands windmilling, my brain screaming a single coherent message. Impact. Pain. Hospital. The hard tile floor of the lobby was rushing up to meet me. I braced for the impact, for the crack of bone, for the hot flash of pain that I knew was coming. But it never came. Something caught me. I felt it, a presence, a force, something impossibly strong, grab me by the chest. Not hands exactly, not anything solid that I could feel pressing against fabric or skin, but a force, an invisible hand made of pure intention. It stopped my fall completely, suspended me in mid-air for a split second that felt like an eternity. I hung there, a foot from the ground, my arms still windmilling, my eyes wide. Then I was set down, gently, my feet touching the tile floor with barely a sound. I stood there in the empty stairwell, trembling so violently that I had to sit down on the bottom step. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might have a heart attack. My vision was swimming. For several minutes, I couldn't do anything but sit there and try to remember how to breathe. Someone had saved me. Something had saved me. Or I was losing my mind. I sat on that step for almost 20 minutes, staring at nothing, trying to rationalize what had just happened. My foot had caught on something. I'd stumbled, but caught myself on the railing. I'd blacked out and woken up at the bottom of the stairs. Any explanation, any rationalization was better than the alternative. But as I climbed back up the stairs on legs that felt like water, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment of suspension, that impossible moment where the laws of physics had decided to make an exception for me. Marks 5 and 6, a warning unheard and a fear answered. The 5th and 6th marks came in quick succession, like a 1-2 punch from this invisible force that was now ordering my life, orchestrating events with terrifying precision. The 5th came the next day. I was at a shopping mall, trying to lose myself in the crowd and the distraction of consumer goods. I was heading to the elevator on the 3rd floor when I felt it, a sudden, inexplicable wave of pure dread. Not the normal anxiety I'd been living with since my mother died. This was different. This was primal, ancient. It was a silent, internal scream that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than my conscious mind. A voice made of pure instinct, screaming, "Do not get in." I hesitated at the elevator doors. They were already open, and I could see the empty car inside. Music playing softly from hidden speakers. The reflection of fluorescent lights on polished metal. Everything normal. Everything safe. I didn't get in. The doors slid closed. A moment later, the lights on the floor indicator went dark. A horrible, metallic grinding screech echoed down the elevator shaft. A sound like the building itself was dying. Then, the distant sound of the alarm bell ringing in the basement. Security guards came rushing past me moments later, heading for the stairwell. I stood there at the elevator doors, my heart pounding, knowing with absolute certainty that if I had gotten in that elevator, I would not be standing here now. That evening I was walking home through the park. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. The trees were bare, their branches reaching up like skeletal fingers. There were still a few people around, joggers, dog walkers, people trying to squeeze in a moment of exercise before the day ended. But it felt isolated anyway. A dog came bounding toward me. It was large, a pit bull or some kind of shepherd mix, and it was moving fast, off its leash. Its owner was somewhere behind it, 50 feet away, screaming something I couldn't hear. The dog's teeth were bared. Not attacking mode exactly, but not friendly either. The kind of look that meant the dog had decided something was wrong with me and it was going to do something about it. I froze. Every cell in my body was screaming at me to run, but I knew that was the wrong instinct. Running would trigger the chase response. So I stood there, absolutely still, and watched this animal charge directly at me. The dog was 3 feet away when it stopped. It wasn't a gradual deceleration. It wasn't the dog having second thoughts or hearing its owner calling. It was an immediate halt. Every muscle locked, every neuron firing in reverse. It was as if someone had pressed a pause button on the universe, and the dog was the only thing affected. For a moment, less than a second, but feeling like an eternity, I saw something in the dog's eyes. Not fear exactly, but recognition. The look of an animal that had just realized what it was actually looking at. Something that transcended the dog's understanding of the world. Something other. Then the dog yelped, a high-pitched, terrified sound, tucked its tail between its legs, and bolted. It ran past me without touching me, ran back toward its owner, who was staring at both of us with an expression of confusion and concern. I didn't stick around for explanations. I left the park immediately, keeping my head down, walking fast enough that I wasn't quite running, but was definitely hurrying away from the situation. When I got home and looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. My face had a strange quality to it that I couldn't quite define. My eyes looked hollow. My skin looked too pale. Something about my expression had shifted. Something fundamental had changed in my appearance in a way that had nothing to do with physical features. The dog had seen it. My mother's therapist was about to see it. I was beginning to suspect that everyone could see it but me. Something was marking me. Something was claiming me. The turning point. A moment of dark understanding. After the 6th mark, I made a decision. I needed to know if I was going insane or if this was actually happening. I called my therapist and asked for an urgent appointment. Dr. Morrison worked me in that Friday afternoon. Her office was all soft earth tones and plants and the kind of orchestral music that's supposed to be calming, but somehow feels like it's waiting to betray you. I sat across from her in a leather chair that was too soft, sinking into it like quicksand, and I told her about the quarter, about the bell, about the things that were happening to me. I didn't mention the creature. I didn't mention my mother's dying prophecy. I kept it vague, strange coincidences, feelings of being watched, anxiety that felt supernatural. Dr. Morrison listened patiently, taking notes. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me over her reading glasses. "When did your mother pass?" she asked, though I'm sure she already knew. 2 months ago. And these experiences started after her death? Not immediately, I said. A few weeks after. She nodded thoughtfully. I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. When was the last time you slept for more than 4 hours? When did you last eat a full meal? I couldn't answer. I realized in that moment that I couldn't remember. Days and weeks had blurred together. I'd been functioning on coffee and inertia and the kind of autopilot that keeps you moving through the world without actually living in it. Grief does strange things to the brain, Dr. Morrison said carefully, in that tone therapists use when they're about to tell you something you don't want to hear. Sleep deprivation, malnutrition, high cortisol levels from prolonged stress, these things can cause hallucinations. They can create a sense of persecution, patterns where there are none. The mind tries to make sense of chaos by creating order, even if that order is supernatural. She paused. She was choosing her words carefully now. I think you might be experiencing a grief-induced break from reality, a kind of temporary psychosis. It's not uncommon. It doesn't mean you're permanently broken, but I think we should consider medication, and I'd like to refer you to a psychiatrist who specializes in— No, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow. No medication. I understand you're hesitant, but you don't understand, I said. I stood up. My legs were shaking. Thank you for your time. I didn't go back. I didn't call. I left my phone on my desk at work on Monday and went home and sat in the dark. Because I realized something in that moment. Dr. Morrison's explanation made perfect sense. It was rational. It was probable. It was the explanation a reasonable person would arrive at. And I desperately wanted it to be true. Because if it wasn't true, if these things were actually happening, then the alternative was so much worse.
Marks 7 and 8. A scent of the old earth and a touch of cold fur. I began to see it more clearly, though never directly. In the reflection of my dark TV screen, I'd see a shape standing in the room behind me. It was tall, stooped like an old man, with arms that were too long, their hands almost touching the floor. In the reflection of a shop window as I walked past, I'd see it, a dark, hulking shape following a few paces behind me, always keeping to the shadows. The 7th and 8th marks brought it closer, from a visual presence to a physical one. I started to notice a strange smell in my apartment, a smell that would come and go without reason. It was a heavy, musky, animal scent. The smell of damp, rich earth and something else, something like wet fur mixed with the metallic tang of rust, like old coins left in the rain. One night I was lying in bed, the lights on, my nerves a raw, jangled mess. I was drifting in that gray space before sleep when I felt something brush against my outstretched hand. It was a coarse, bristly feeling, like touching a thick, wiry animal pelt. The contact lasted only a fraction of a second, but I felt the warmth of it, the presence of it. I snatched my hand back with a choked cry, my heart exploding in my chest. I turned on every light in my bedroom and sat there for the rest of the night, waiting for dawn, watching the shadows. I was 9 marks in. The terror was a constant companion now. I knew the 10th mark was coming, and I knew that with it would come the final, terrible reveal. I didn't know what I was more afraid of, the waiting or the seeing. The 9th mark came last night. I had finally managed to fall into a fitful, exhausted sleep. I was woken not by a sound, but by a feeling, a pressure in the room, a thickness in the air, as if something heavy and ancient had just materialized on the other side of my closed bedroom door. Then I heard it, a voice, low, guttural, wet, like something trying to speak through water or through a mouth that wasn't quite designed for human language. The voice came from inside the room, whispered directly into my ear, even though I was alone. The voice spoke a single word, a word in no language I knew, but I understood its meaning perfectly. It resonated in my bones, in my blood, in the deepest parts of my consciousness. Mine. I spent the rest of the night huddled in a corner of my living room, clutching a baseball bat, watching the shadows, waiting for the dawn. My body was shaking so violently that I could barely hold the bat. My teeth were chattering. But it wasn't just fear anymore. Underneath the terror, something else had begun to grow. Something that felt like resignation, like acceptance, because I was beginning to understand. All of this, the marks, the protection,
the impossible interventions. It wasn't random. It wasn't my imagination. It was a claiming. My mother had passed something to me, a gift, a curse, a responsibility, and it was too late to refuse it. Mark 10, a gaze returned. Tonight, I knew it would end, the final mark. I sat on my couch, every light in my apartment blazing, the TV off, my phone off, just me and the suffocating silence of my apartment. The feeling of the presence in the room was overwhelming. It was a physical pressure, a thickness in the air. The musky, animal scent was overpowering now, so strong it coated the back of my throat. I could feel it, just there, in the dark hallway that led to my bedroom, waiting, patient, ancient. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was 2 months of grief. Maybe it was weeks of mounting terror. Maybe it was the fact that I was tired, so impossibly tired, of being afraid. But I was done being the victim in this story. I was done being a character watching events unfold around me. I needed to know. "Okay," I said, my voice a shaking, defiant whisper to the empty air. "I know you're here. Show yourself. I'm done waiting." The air in the hallway seemed to shimmer, to darken. A shape began to resolve itself out of the gloom. At first, it was the familiar, stooped silhouette of an old man. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, even with its hunched posture. Its arms were long, the gnarled, 3-jointed fingers of its hands brushing against the floorboards. Its body was covered in a thick, matted, greasy black fur. And then it lifted its head, and I saw its face. The world stopped, and in that moment of frozen time, I understood something that broke something fundamental inside me. This wasn't a creature that existed in the world. This was something that shouldn't exist at all. Causality bent around it. Time moved wrong when I looked at it. My mind kept trying to process what I was seeing, kept rejecting it, kept trying again, like a computer crashing and restarting over and over. Its eyes were enormous, set deep in a skull that was almost bovine, almost goat-like, but subtly wrong in ways my brain couldn't quite catalog. They were ancient eyes, patient eyes, eyes that had watched civilizations rise and fall and turn to dust, eyes that had been waiting for me. But it was the intelligence in those eyes that truly broke me. This wasn't an animal. This was something that had been alive since before humanity learned to fear the dark, something that understood language, emotion, sacrifice, loss, something that had watched my mother die and had waited faithfully for the moment it could pass to me. And in its ancient yellow gaze, I saw it. The same serene, peaceful, knowing look my mother had on her face when she died. I didn't scream. The sound was trapped in my throat, a solid, immovable ball of pure terror. We just stared at each other for an eternity across the 20 feet of my brightly lit living room, and in its eyes I understood. It had never come to harm me. It had come to protect me. My mother's final words echoed in my head. "I've never been afraid. He's always been with me." The creature tilted its head, studying me. Then, impossibly, it smiled. Its lips, if you could call them that, peeled back, revealing teeth that were far too numerous and arranged in patterns that made no sense. The smile was ancient. It was knowing. It was the smile of something that had finally found what it had been waiting for. It is my protector, my guardian. It has been with me, a silent, unseen shadow, for the past 2 months. It cleared the path for me. It saved me from the fall. It frightened away the dog. It warned me away from danger. And now that I have seen it, now that I have looked directly into its eyes and understood what it is, it no longer feels the need to hide. The acceptance. I should be terrified. I am terrified. But underneath the terror, there's something else, something that makes me sick to admit. Relief. For the first time since Mom died, I don't feel alone. For 2 months, I've been drowning in this apartment, in this city, in my own skin. The grief was a living thing, a monster all its own, crushing me under its weight day after day. I'd lost my mother, lost myself, lost any reason to believe that the world made sense or that I had any place in it. And now something is watching me, protecting me. Even if that protection comes in the form of something that shouldn't exist, something that defies the laws of reality itself, at least I know I'm not forgotten. At least someone, something, still cares. That thought terrifies me more than the creature itself, because it means I might not want to escape. And if I don't want to escape, what does that make me? What does it say about me that I would choose this companionship over loneliness? That I would accept a guardian angel that looks like a nightmare over no guardian at all? The morning light is starting to fade. It's 7 p.m. and the sun is already gone. The creature is still in the corner of my room, motionless, watching me with those impossible eyes. It hasn't made a move. It hasn't threatened me. It's just there, waiting. I think about Dr. Morrison, about the medication she wanted to prescribe, about the comfortable, rational explanation for everything I've experienced, about how easy it would be to call her back and say, "You were right. I'm broken. I need help." But I also think about my mother, about the look on her face when she died, about the absolute certainty in her voice when she told me I would be safe. I look at the creature in the corner of my room, at the ancient intelligence in its eyes, at the patience in its posture. "Are you going to stay?" I ask it. The creature doesn't answer. It doesn't move. But something shifts in its expression, something that might be satisfaction, something that might be love, filtered through a form so alien that human emotion can barely translate it. I realize I'm not trembling anymore. "I think I'm going to ask you to stay," I say. My voice is quiet, steady. I don't know how this works. I don't know what it means. But I know I don't want to be alone anymore. And if this is what my mother left me, if this is the inheritance that came with her death, then maybe that's okay. The creature takes a step toward me. Its hooves, I can see them now beneath the matted fur, click softly against the hardwood floor. Click, click, click. The sound echoes through my apartment like a clock counting down. Or counting up. I can't tell which. It stops 3 feet from me and sits. Not like a human sits, but like something folding itself down, joints bending in directions that don't quite make sense. We sit in silence for a long time, hours maybe. The light outside fades completely. My apartment grows dark, but I don't turn on the lights. I don't need them anymore, because in the darkness I can feel its presence, steady, constant, real. And for the first time in 2 months, I feel like I might actually survive this. I feel like I might actually be okay. Tomorrow, I'll figure out what to do. Tomorrow, I'll face the questions about what I am and what I've become. Tomorrow, I'll try to live a life that makes sense alongside a creature that defies sense. But tonight, I sit in the dark with my mother's final gift, and I wait, and I am no longer afraid.